With new, gentler scented Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean finally smells as good as it feels. On everything from lamps to ceiling fans. Even on your kid's toy shark. Oh, ouch. Clorox disinfecting wipes. Now available in... Ooh, crisp lemon. Find it on Amazon. Clorox. Clean feels good.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration. And use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
In what is not in the film is somehow he managed to get hold of a bottle of bourbon, which he drinks, the entire bottle, and is then able to bust out. I mean, I guess he's just so full of Dutch courage. He just thinks I'm invincible and just goes around killing everyone as he manages to escape. It's got the sort of classic Bond tropes, really. So Goldfinger is the kind of classic Ian Fleming novel, I think, that I love reading.
Welcome to the SpyMasters podcast. It's a special episode this week. I'm talking to Oliver Webb-Carter, the editor of Aspects of History magazine. We'll be introducing a joint project, an exciting new anthology of spy writing, and Ollie will be picking his top 5 books about espionage and his top 3 films. He's put together an incredible list, with lots that I imagine will be new to you. Lots of it was new to me. We've got some brilliant guests coming up on SpyMasters podcast, including novelist Merle Nygate and Hugh Wilford talking about his groundbreaking new book on the CIA. So don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And now over to me, talking to Oliver Webb-Carter. Ollie, thank you so much for joining me on SpyMasters podcast. It's brilliant to have you.
Well, thank you for having me, Antonia.
So, Ollie, we've been collaborating on something quite exciting, which is the first ever SpyMasters book. It's coming out today, I believe, on the day that this podcast is going out, and it's like an anthology of some of the best spy writing around, with some of the people who've collaborated with me on the podcast and some of the people who were involved in Aspects of History, the magazine, and the wider platform. How's it been putting it together? Have you what are your highlights? What are your favorite bits that we've got in there?
Well, it's always quite fun collecting lots of excellent writing, really, I suppose, from both the website and the magazine. So there's a few highlights for me, Antonia. Of course, your introduction goes without saying.
Of course.
But and then also you feature again in the sort of, I guess this is the main part, I think, of the book, is your interview with General Petraeus, the former director of the CIA. So I very much enjoyed reading that. Petraeus is obviously an interesting figure, and to have managed to have got an interview with him was very impressive.
It was brilliant to get him. One of the reasons I was so keen to do him was because he's one of the few people who have operated on both sides of the coin, right? So he's been director of the CIA, obviously one of the world's most renowned intelligence agencies. So he's been on that side of the coin, but he's also been a general on the ground using military intelligence to make really quite critical decisions. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. So he's both a kind of creator of intelligence and a user of intelligence. And it was that unique insight that I thought made his interview with me so interesting. And also, it's great to have it in the anthology. What we have in that anthology as well, which I really, really love, is a really strong mix of fact and fiction. And I talk a little bit in my introduction about the fact that this is one of the few areas of historical inquiry where fact and fiction actually kind of merge a little bit. The sort of fictional spy stuff informs the real world spy stuff, and then the real world spy stuff informs the fictional stuff, and there's almost a kind of feedback loop, and I think that's so fascinating. So it's great to have both in the anthology. So we've got a short story by Alex Gurlis, for example, who's been a contributor on SpyMasters and is a fantastic spy writer, and people I know he has legions of fans.
Yeah, he's got a new book that's just out that has been getting rave reviews.
Yeah, it's really good. It's about, and it's a very clever conceit, because at the heart of it is a double agent, but you don't know who it is. It's one of the characters in the book, but over the course of the series, you don't know which one is the double agent. It's very, very clever. And Ollie, I mean, there's a wonderful interview with Alex Gurlis on the SpyMasters backlist if anybody wants to hear more about that book, because it's completely brilliant. We've also got an interview with Ben McIntyre, who's obviously the king of spy writing in terms of popular history. So there's loads and loads of stuff in there. I can't recommend it highly enough. Where can people get it, Ollie?
Well, if I picked it, well, it's available on Amazon, both as hardback and Kindle, and then it'll be ready as a paperback. But there was one other one that I actually quite like reading about, which is about George Blake, the traitor spy who was revealed in the 60s. I forget which year. I think it was 62 or 63. He got put in jail for 40 years. 42 years was his sentence, which was supposedly a year for each of his victims who were killed by East German. I think it was predominantly in East Berlin. All the agents were rounded up. MI6 agents were rounded up and killed. And I had my father worked in military intelligence in the early 70s in Berlin, and he had spoken to a colleague who had revealed that Blake had insisted, as an employee of MI6, he had insisted that all the British Army's agents be handed over to MI6, so that they were then run by MI6, and of course that meant that their identities were exposed to the Stasi when Blake flipped and defected. He was busted out of prison by some highly naive idiots, basically, who thought his sentence was too long. But he got 42 years for each of the agents who were supposedly shot by the Stasi. But yes, my dad had also said that he had been giving. This is just a small story, so it's not a big deal or anything. But he was responsible for giving out payment for agents who had been arrested and then had been sent back to West Berlin because they weren't required anymore, but the Germans didn't want them as dangerous subversives. And one man had been put in jail for 10 years for giving train movements. He'd worked for the railway, and all that his payment was packs of cigarettes. And
really?
Yeah, so so my father had handed over these packs of cigarettes as payment, and I think a bit of a cash award as well. But these are minimal amounts, and he got 10 years in jail, which I should imagine was not an enjoyable experience. So the piece by Simon Cooper, who's written a very good book on George Blake, is interesting. I think Cooper began as being a little bit more sympathetic to Blake, the sort of ideological side of things. But it's difficult to have sympathy for someone like that when you see the human cost.
It's interesting that as well, because there's Blake being the last kind of ideological spy. I mean, Michael Ridpath, who's another great writer, has got a piece in the anthology about the atmosphere in the 1930s, where there was a great kind of push by the Soviet Union to find ideological patsies to be their spies. And Ridpath has a lot of sympathy for them within the context of the 1930s. It is harder to see by the end of the 50s into the 60s that anybody could not be aware of exactly what the cause was that they were prepared to kill for. So yeah, I'm not sure how strong one's ideological sympathies, but it's interesting how strong one's sympathies can be.
Well, when I was speaking to Michael Smith, actually, and I hope the listeners don't mind me can indulge us, but I was speaking to Michael Smith, and he had a kind of sneaking respect for Guy Burgess, who he said was very much in support of the working class, and as a member of the working class, Michael Smith kind of respected that. So
Well, I know Guy Burgess certainly enjoyed sleeping with the working class. He had a particular penchant for rough trade. I'm writing a book about the Cambridge Five, as you know, Ollie, and I'm going to have an argument with Michael Smith about this because I have genuinely no sympathy for Guy Burgess at all. I think I'm glad he rotted to death in Moscow. But this, but this is sort of testament to how fascinating this stuff is. The stories in this world are extraordinary, and there's so much moral murkiness in everything that the people in our anthology are writing about, and in the kind of wider books and media surrounding espionage. And the meat of our conversation today, Ollie, we're going to talk about your favorite books about espionage. I know this is a subject that you have a deep and enduring passion for, so I'm excited to see what you've got for us today, what treasures you're going to suggest to our readers.
Yes, so right, well, I had actually, I have to confess, done a Dead Drop 5 conversation with Shane Whaley from Spybury, and it was a similar question, 5 books. So I've not picked any that I'd picked for him. This is fresh. And actually, I could have picked another 5. So it's very difficult to zero down. But I've tried to pick a selection that are not dominated by kind of Cold War spy books. So my first one is called Rise and Kill First, and that's by Ronan Bergman, and it's the secret history of Israel's targeted assassinations. So it was written in 2019. It doesn't include, of course, it won't include, October the 7th and the intelligence failings after of that date. But it's it's a really interesting book that looks at since the founding of the state of Israel in 48. Ronan Bergman is a journalist, and his brilliant contacts within the Mossad and Shin Bet. And he takes a really critical eye and looks at all the operations conducted by the Israeli intelligence services post 48. And as you read about all these operations, there's a reason why the Mossad gets this reputation as being so sort of, I don't know whether it's them, obviously got a reputation as being very good, although October the 7th is clearly is clearly a problem there. But also they seem to go down the route of assassination, i.e. they almost have this tool, this hammer, and if ever there's a problem, intelligence-wise, then it looks like a nail. So their hammer being their assassination teams, and they just sort of assassinate everyone. And as you're reading these sort of operation after operation where Mossad are generally efficiently dealing with all their enemies, you do begin to, and he's very good on this, you begin to suspect, is this really the best way of dealing with their enemies? In that it keeps on happening. And the cycle of violence continues. And Ronan Bergman is very good on asking that question. It starts with a really interesting assassination that took place in Tehran in, I think, 2018, when the head of the Iranian nuclear program, or certainly a top brain within it, is driving in a car through the streets of Tehran, and a Mossad assassination team kills him using basically a piece of AI. It's a machine gun that is hooked up to the internet. This is sounding super advanced, but I'm explaining it in a very crude way. And it scans the face of its target to match it against the victim that they need, the man that they want to kill. All this happens within a millisecond. It's a match. The machine gun shoots him, kills him. He's dead. And it's an incredible operation. But that's his introduction. And then he goes through 48 all the way. It involves, the Munich massacre and the response to that. and I'll mention that in one of my other book selections as well. But it's really interesting in covering these assassination teams, but there is this kind of question at the end, like they just keep on happening, and is anything actually improving?
That sounds very fascinating. It's not one I know actually, and incredibly timely.
Indeed,
Ollie,
indeed.
that's going on my list. That's on my to read list, which is not a short list, I have to say.
I know. Well, I've tried to pick, as I said, not solely Cold War and Russians and Brits. So my second choice involves Northern Ireland.
Mm.
And, I mean, this is a book by Peter Taylor, who's a veteran BBC journalist who actually I interviewed him last year when his book came out. And the book is Operation Chiffon. And this is the intelligence operation from the very early years of the Troubles all the way up until the Belfast Agreement, also known as the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. And it's absolutely fascinating because it covers sort of three intelligence officers, two MI6 and then finally one MI5 officer. The book opens with Peter Taylor knocks on the door of someone he thinks is the MI5 officer who was involved in bringing the IRA to the peace table, the negotiations with the British government. And the chap who answers the door sort of, I don't know who you're looking for. I don't know. You've got the wrong house. And it's really interesting because later, and then Peter Taylor describes his whole experience. He arrived in Northern Ireland within a few hours of the Bloody Sunday killings in 1972, January 1972. So he arrives, at probably the nadir of the British Army's presence in Northern Ireland, but from even that year, 1972, which I think was the most lethal year of all of the years of the Troubles, he is speaking with intelligence officers and government officials who are keen to speak to the IRA. And even as early as that period, the IRA were meeting, I think Jerry Adams and Sean McStuffin, who was the chief of staff of the IRA, travelled to London to meet Willie Whitelaw at the time to discuss a potential peace operation. But it covers the whole period really. And Peter Taylor's just got so many great contacts on all sides, including the loyalist side as well. So he's the go-to person if anyone wants to read any non-fiction on Northern Ireland.
Sounds like another brilliant one, Ollie. Thank you so much. Onwards. What else have we got?
Right. Okay. So my third one is a novel. Those two are obviously non-fiction. This one's a novel, and it is absolutely brilliant. It's called The Sympathizer, and it is about Vietnam and the aftermath of Vietnam, and it is written by an American Vietnamese author called Viet Thanh Nguyen. Nguyen, I think, is actually how you pronounce the surname. It won the American Pulitzer Prize. I don't know if the American Pulitzer Prize is all that it is nowadays, but this book is absolutely incredible. It's based around the fall of Saigon and the CIA. There's CIA involvement, of course, in South Vietnam, and the narrator of the book is a Vietnamese person who's from Saigon, and it's all very murky. He then travels to Los Angeles and lives in Los Angeles with the Vietnamese exiles there, and all the time there is espionage and spying going on, both from the last days of the American presence in Vietnam and then within the Vietnamese community, as the North Vietnamese want to find out what the Vietnamese community in America are up to. And it's brilliant. It's written with a huge amount of sort of pathos and It's a sort of tragic conflict, really. I think they're making a TV series about it, starring Robert Downey Jr., who plays a
Wow, okay.
CIA officer. Yeah, and it's an absolutely fantastic book. And I read it when it came out. I think was it within a year of it coming out, and was just blown away by it. And I'm fascinated by the war in Vietnam, and then of course the intelligence war as well, which is, I mean, everyone's betraying each other. I mean, it's so interesting because you have North and South Vietnam, of course, and that suggests there is a border, and north of the border, everyone's, communist, and south of the border, everyone's capitalist and, supported by America. But it's so much more complicated than that. I mean, of course, the Viet Cong were all over South Vietnam. They couldn't be removed. So, and this book is just excellent on Saigon and the last days of Saigon as well.
Fantastic. Ollie, you're making me feel very I often think I've read almost everything, and yet you've come up with 3 I haven't read. I'm feeling very discombobulated here today. But this is good. This is good.
No, well, you'll have read one of them. You'll have read one of them, I'm sure. I hope. Well, it's a Bond. I've picked number 5 as a Bond book. So.
Oh, right. Okay.
Well, actually, why don't I do my Bond book now?
Go on then. Go Bond.
I haven't read all the shock horror. I have not read all Ian Fleming's Bond novels. I read the William Boyd one, Solo. That was really good. And I've read quite a few, but Goldfinger is the one I think is my favorite. I, of course, had seen the film before I read the novel, and Sean Connery is in my mind's eye as James Bond. He just is. Okay, so Goldfinger is it's such a great story. I'm sure everyone listening has seen it. If they're listening to SpyMasters podcast and haven't seen Goldfinger, then watch Goldfinger. But I love the novel. It's actually quite similar to the film. There's a little bit more sexual politics, if that's even possible within a Bond book, with Pussy Galore in charge of her team of lesbian pilots. So, it kind of makes his sort of conquest of her even more impressive, speaking from a man's standpoint there.
Ollie, you're a murky territory here.
Am I?
Carry on.
And it's just Connery just being I said Connery, it's James Bond. One thing that the film doesn't really bring across is the sheer quantities of alcohol that Bond consumes. I remember in the novel he is imprisoned. It's also in the film. He's imprisoned in a sort of cell in the Kentucky countryside on a ranch for racehorses, and this is in what is not in the film is somehow he managed to get hold of a bottle of bourbon, which he drinks the entire bottle. And is then able to bust out. I mean, I guess he's just so full of Dutch courage. He just thinks I'm invincible and just goes around killing everyone as he manages to escape. It's got the sort of classic Bond tropes, really. So Goldfinger is the kind of classic Ian Fleming novel, I think, that I love reading.
Yeah, great fun. And dated. I mean, how do you find the kind of datedness of it now? Do you like that, or is it kind of sometimes grating?
I think actually sometimes it can be a bit difficult, particularly I read Dr. No, and I don't think he behaves very well in Jamaica. So I think there are a few things that need to be updated, but I think nowadays, you see, I think I've picked a film, I have picked a Bond film for my 3 films, and actually, I think that the way the films are going, I know there's talk of them setting it in the 60s so that he doesn't come across as being too I don't know, too sexist and all that kind of stuff. Because I don't like the Craig. I think Daniel Craig is not a very good Bond myself. He's charmless, conceited. He's irritating. He's the sort of person I imagine if you
Sit on the
invite.
fence, Ollie.
Yeah, I really don't like him. And if you, we could probably talk more about it when we get to the film. So I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. But to me, Sean Connery and Timothy Dalton are most closely related to the Bond of the Fleming novels. Not to say you have to be, because Roger Moore I enjoyed watching, but
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Daniel Craig, I don't think is the Bond of the novels at all, which may or may not matter anymore. But it would be interesting going back to the 60s, because the Bond in the original book, by today's standards, is obviously unbelievably sexist and racist. So if you put it back in the 60s, they would have to, I guess, drop all that. I can't imagine them doing it kind of faithfully in that sense, which is a good thing. I'm not sure many cinema goers would like to see Bond being astonished at women driving cars and things like that, which obviously there's quite a lot of in the books. Mind you, to be fair, if he saw me driving a car, he would be justified in his abhorrence for such an act.
Part of the reason why Bond is so popular is because of those films, the first sort of, all the Sean Connery and the Roger Moore films. They made Bond the phenomenon that it is. So I don't think they can turn their backs too much on what Bond is. Bond is a sexist. There's no requirement for him to be racist, I don't think.
Although he is in the books. I mean, I recently reread a couple of them, having not read them since I was a teenager. And actually, the sexism I didn't mind because I kind of found it funny. But the racism I found quite difficult.
Yeah. Well, Ian Fleming, of course, was racist. So,
yeah.
Even by the standards of his time. But, I mean, he was a deeply strange individual.
And probably pissed half the time. I mean, your comment about them, the amount Bond drinks, reading about the type of guys who were working for intelligence and the government during the war, and Churchill himself, it's astonishing we fought a war. Everybody was absolutely off their trolley the entire time. The amount people drank. Ollie, you are no slouch in the drinking department. I've been out with you a couple of times, but you would be under the table in a drinking contest with Fleming and Churchill within half an hour.
I would certainly like to have a go, but but I don't think it's as okay. Yes, so we're in this very boring corporate governmental world nowadays where everyone is very sober, in both alcohol wise and just generally. And we don't have so many characters anymore. You get nowadays we seem to have politicians of all stripes and colours are all very managerial and serious. I think there's something to be said for a little bit more character, and with character you get flaws and a bit more boozing. And I don't think that's the end of the world. Obviously, you wouldn't want them to operate a drone or a or anything else like that. But I think we've become so dreary nowadays that I think we're suffering slightly as a result.
I think I would strongly agree with that, to be honest. Right, book number 5, Ollie, what have you got for me?
Right, so this is I've kind of topped and tailed this list with the Mossad and the problems in the Middle East. And this is a book called One Day in September. Now, this book was written, it's non-fiction. It is written by Simon Reeve. Now, for listeners who think that name sounds familiar, Simon Reeve is the wonderful travel guy on documentaries on BBC. And he's, such a lovely person when you watch him on the documentaries. He's sort of traveling all over the world, and he's always in wonderment at people he meets and the climate and everything like that. And he's a sort of person I watch and think, what a lovely person. And I think this is his first book he'd written. It's actually off the back of an Oscar-winning film directed by Kevin MacDonald, who also directed Touching the Void, which was the documentary about climbing a mountain in South America.
Yeah.
And One Day in September was narrated by Michael Douglas, and it's all about the Munich attacks. And the book covers both the Munich attacks in real detail and also Operation Wrath of God, which was the Mossad response to those attacks, where they hunted down everyone who had anything to do with the attack on the Israeli Olympic team in Munich in 1972. They hunted them down and killed them. And this book is, you listeners might be thinking, oh, that's a bit of crossover from Rise and Kill First, and it isn't actually, because it goes into a lot more detail and covers the Munich attacks in great detail too, which Ronan Bergman's book does not do. And it's just so compelling on, reading about what the sheer horrors of those Israeli athletes had to go through. And then you are kind of, it places you in the position of, I guess, people in Israel must have just, you have your Olympic team, 12 murdered in horrible ways. And there is an operation that Simon Reeve writes about, and he's such a good. It's amazing. He's self-taught almost. I think he joined the Times or the Sunday Times as a 16-year-old in the mailroom.
Really, nobody does that anymore.
I know. He had a difficult childhood. He got expelled from schools, and I think someone in the Times took him under his wing, and he got promoted up to work as a journalist there. And he wrote this brilliant book, and I think it's still in print. It was written 25 years ago when the film came out. It was in response to the film, but it's absolutely a brilliant book. On the front, the cover is sort of the picture of that terrorist in Black September with the balaclava over his head. And one of the operations that Simon Reeve writes about is when the Israeli special forces alongside Mossad, they got in rubber boats and went from Israel into Beirut. And one of the operatives was Ehud Barak, later Prime Minister of Israel. They dressed up as women, approached this checkpoint run by the PLO, and obviously dressed as women managed to breach the defenses, and it involved about, I think, 50 Israeli soldiers, and they just go into this terrorist stronghold, and there's a massive gun battle, and they kill their targets who they were after. It's, whatever side you're on, it's just fascinating reading about the fighting in the Middle East between these kind of really highly trained on both sides, sort of special forces in a way.
I mean, it's interesting you've picked two books involving kind of Mossad and Israel. Do you think that it's kind of in your mind? Are these helpful books, do you think, for context, or are they
I think
discreet to themselves?
I think they maybe listeners might be thinking, gosh, this guy really likes Mossad. It's not that. It's not that I think they obviously seem to be very effective. But a lot of these operations took place in the 70s. Nothing's changed. There's still fighting going on. It's not gonna. There has to be another way, I guess. Is what I'm trying to get to. I mean, I don't know what the other way is. I have no idea. No one should ask me. I don't know. But I think it probably. You get to see both sides. A lot of the Black September terrorists had grown up in refugee camps. That can't, that's not a normal way of upbringing. Of course, you're going to be turned against the people who've, in your mind, have put you there. So it's just that kind of cycle of violence. So that's really what I'm getting at. Right.
Well, they all sound absolutely brilliant, Ollie. Thank you for that. So 5 books, all on my to-read list now. As I mentioned, I'm discombobulated about the fact that I haven't actually read them because, well, apart from the Bond, I've read that. Goldfinger, because, I feel I'm, as I said, quite well read. In fact, I read a lot, but as we discovered in conversation the other day, I don't watch films, which you found really problematic. I don't really watch telly, but I really don't watch films.
I don't understand.
And you were appalled.
I am. I do. I mean, it's difficult to find decent films nowadays. I got to say, I'm a bit saddened by where we are, but what can you do? But yes, I did pick 3 films.
Yeah, to educate me.
Yes.
Because, I'm running a spy podcast and I don't really watch spy films. Or, I mean, I don't watch any films. It's not specifically spy films. I don't watch any films. Apart from, I think part of the reason why I don't watch films is I've got 3 kids. So I spent too many years falling asleep in front of crappy stuff about princesses. And just it put me off the whole the whole shebang. I'd rather read a book.
CBeebies.
Yeah. And like also, kids movies for the last 20 years are all about kind of, being nice and follow your dreams. And I'm like sitting in the corner grumpily thinking, do dreams pay the mortgage, kids? No, they don't. So I'm sort of getting more cynical and cross about all films. But I'm prepared to be educated. And I can also, now that my kids are a bit older, I can stay awake past 8:30. So maybe I'll get to the end of some of these 3 films that you're about to suggest to me. So I'm going to go away. I'm going to watch them. I promise. And I will tweet, I guess, on the SpyMasters account about whether I've been converted by you to the joys of seeing some of this stuff on the screen as well as on the page. So go, tell me, what should I watch?
Okay, first film is a documentary. It's directed by Alex Gibney, who I think he got an Oscar. He wrote Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, which was a portent for the financial crisis a few years later, and Taxi to the Dark Side, which was about American soldiers behaving badly in Iraq. But the film is called 0 Days. It was made in 2016, and I watched this and actually got quite afraid. It is all about cyber warfare, and in particular, one operation that was it was a computer virus that was developed by the Americans. So the film opens, it was in about 2011 or 2012. Film opens with a couple of antivirus software engineers in Hamburg. Now that doesn't sound particularly exciting, but they are describing what it was like to discover this virus. They couldn't understand where it was from. Then they did more digging. It turned out that, yes, indeed, the Americans, in particular, I think it was the National Security Agency, NSA, had developed this basically it's a computer worm where the idea is you plug your USB stick into the target. So it requires an individual to actually, human intelligence operative, an agent to be on the ground. And then this worm burrows into the Windows software system and starts messing up equipment. And so the reason for it being built was that the Americans wanted to disrupt the Iranian nuclear program. And the documentary looks at how it happened. And it seems as though under the Obama administration, the intelligence agencies presented this form of cyber warfare as kind of almost victimless and risk-free. And nothing could be further from the truth. The operation itself, it seems as though there was some row between the Americans and the Mossad, in that the Mossad were, as usual, highly aggressive. And so used this piece of software, and I think the Americans weren't expecting it to be used as aggressively as it was. But basically, it disrupted the Iranian subterfuge, their nuclear uranium enrichment program. So therefore, meant that the Iranians can't develop nuclear weapons, or as the Iranians would argue, nuclear power. But it's nuclear weapons, really. But it's a brilliant film because that's the sort of first half of the film looks at how it happened, how the operation happened, which is really interesting. But then the second half looks at, well, this is a major escalation in cyber warfare from, supposedly the West. So the West has ramped this stuff up. It didn't disrupt the Iranian nuclear program. In fact, the Iranian nuclear program increased in its production in the wake of the attack. So it failed in its own terms. And it's also led to, we're constantly reading about cyber attacks coming from, Russia and other countries. And it asks the question, what oversight took place to allow this kind of attack? Was the Obama administration aware of what they were doing? and it interviews a number of really senior figures in the American intelligence services. I think an American general was court-martialed and nearly went to jail. I think he was pardoned by the Obama for leaking details around this kind of operation. So it's a really fascinating documentary. And Gibney is a really good documentary maker, so he ramps up the tension.
That sounds incredible. I will definitely watch that one. I'm completely fascinated by the idea of, the future moving into cyber warfare and AI warfare, and the responsibility that democracies have to handle this stuff wisely while using it potentially in conflict with regimes that have fewer scruples. So that kind of moral quandary, I'm all over that. I'm in. I'll definitely watch that one.
Well, if you can, I'll be very keen to get General Petraeus back, because I think he was director of the CIA in the aftermath of this, and I'd love to know what he thought about all that. Because I'm not convinced that it was a sensible thing to do. But who am I? What do I know?
Lots, Ollie, lots. Okay, film number 2, go.
Right, 2 and 3 are a bit of fun. So number 2, my favourite Bond film is The Living Daylights, and
Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, Dalton's brilliant in this. He's so good. The opening with Gibraltar and the SAS. It's got a great cast: Joe Don Baker, Jonathan Rhys-Davies. Of course, Dalton's fantastic. It's got, what's the name of that guy? He's the bad guy. He's the Dutch actor, Jeroen Krabbe.
He's got to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I have seen The Living Daylights, but not since I was very, very young. So I will give it another go. And I will say that I didn't like it at the time for reasons that probably didn't occur to you, Ollie, which is that Timothy Dalton is not hot and Bond should be hot.
He is hot, super hot.
He's not hot. He's just not remotely hot. So, yeah, I was absolutely appalled by his casting, because if you've been spoilt with the existence of Sean Connery as James Bond, and then you're confronted as a hormonal teenage girl with the abomination that is Timothy Dalton, no, never forgiven him, never got over it. But I will give it another go now that I'm an adult and obviously more sensible about these things.
The Bond girl Mariam Dabo is wonderful in it, and she's the cellist.
Yes, I remember her.
And I think actually, I haven't read the short story, but the short story that it's based on is all around the sort of a cellist and an assassination, a supposed assassin. But she in the film, she is playing the cello in supposedly Bratislava, and he goes to the opera house to try and thwart this assassination of a supposed defector. And the opera house is actually the Volksopera in Vienna, which I took my wife to watch Rusalka, the opera, on our 10th wedding anniversary.
Oh, there you go. How lovely.
Yes.
Well, I will watch that one. I might watch it with my children, who I think have never seen a Bond film. Can you imagine such a thing?
Well, this one wasn't particularly. It was criticised at the time for not having enough. He didn't have enough sexual partners, because apparently it was in the HIV epidemic, the age of don't die.
Yeah, I remember that. There was a big fuss because he only basically slept with one person, which is for Bonds.
One woman who's in a motorboat circling Gibraltar, waiting for a man to just land in her lap, which she does.
They do that, Ollie. They do that. That's how I spend my holidays. Circling Gibraltar, waiting for Timothy Dalton.
I love that film. I try and watch it every Christmas Day.
Do you?
Yeah. That or Where Eagles Dare, which I nearly picked because it is a spy film, but I didn't. I picked another Richard Burton film.
Okay, well, look, let's do number 3. Your last one. I'm going to, so far I'm all in.
Listeners are probably thinking, where's John le Carré? Well, I could have picked any number of books, but I've picked a film, and it's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and it's starring Richard Burton. Anything Richard Burton is in, I'm kind of all in for. I think Richard Burton's just quite wonderful, and the film follows the book so closely, so they're almost interchangeable. And with the casting of Burton, I love it, and it's just the way Le Carre just, it's like a roller coaster. You're flipped from one side to the other. You don't know who's believes in who and what's going on. And throughout the film, Burton is just plays this sort of alcoholic, aging spy. So he can do that really well. And it's just got what's the name of Bloom? Claire Bloom is the love interest, and she's a sort of idealistic communist who is manipulated by the British Secret Services. It shows, it's classic Le Carre, in unhappy ending, perfidious British secret agents, and the really, you come out of it thinking, well, I often think, what's the point of human intelligence? It just seems to be misery and betrayal. Maybe we should all stick to sort of reading cyber stuff, the decryption and encrypted messages, and not bother with actual secret agents in the field.
Well, obviously I've read The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, but I've never seen the film. So
Richard Burton was Oscar nominated. It's black and white. It was made by Martin Ritt, directed by Martin Ritt, who was a blacklisted director in the 50s in Hollywood. Okay. It's quite interesting. If you read Le Carre's The Pigeon Tunnel, which are his sort of memoirs, he writes about the experience on set and how Richard Burton and Liz Taylor were together at that time. So sort of would summon him for a drink in their suite. Le Carre's quite bitchy about Richard Burton, actually. I think actually slightly unfairly, he implies that Richard Burton didn't support Martin Ritt during the sort of blacklisting period in Hollywood. But Richard Burton was very young when he arrived in Hollywood, when this was all happening, and when it was beginning to die down. So it seems a little bit of an unfair criticism against Richard Burton, who by the sort of mid-60s is a sort of massive star, but a chronic alcoholic.
Yeah, as are so many of the people that we've been talking about today. Maybe there's something about the dark murkiness in which spies and actors operate, that they have to all be terrible pissheads, unlike us pure dreary podcasters. Ollie, thank you so much. I have lots now to read and lots to listen to, and I hope lots to watch rather, and I hope that our listeners,
SpyMasters, the anthology as well, and
SpyMasters, the anthology as well. It's like we're spoiling everybody with a kind of cornucopia spyish treats. Thanks, Ollie.
Thanks, Antonia. Real honour to be on.
Thank you for listening to the SpyMasters podcast. I hope we've given you a host of ideas for your reading and watching lists. Don't forget, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time on SpyMasters.